There are days when everything feels fine. She laughs. She works. She makes plans. Her world feels manageable, even joyful. But then something shifts. Not overnight, not like a storm, but like a slow, creeping fog that starts at the edge of her mind and seeps inward. At first, she brushes it off. A little tiredness. A little irritability. She blames the weather, work, stress, but deep down, a quiet dread starts to build. Because she knows what's coming. She knows the calendar date without even looking. Her body knows before her mind does. The rage, the crying spells, the disconnection, the overwhelming urge to hide, to disappear, to destroy everything in her path or herself. And yet, when she tries to explain this to others, the response is always the same. It's just PMS. Maybe you're overreacting. Are you getting enough sleep? Try yoga. So she starts questioning her own reality. Maybe she is being dramatic. Maybe she is unstable. Maybe she just needs to get over it. But then the same pattern repeats. Month after month. Year after year. The week before her period becomes a battlefield. Her relationships suffer. Her work unravels. Her mental health crumbles. She begins to fear herself. Because how do you trust a mind that turns against you every 28 days? This is the secret agony of PMDD. Not just the symptoms, but the invisibility of it. The invalidation. The misdiagnosis. The isolation. She walks into a doctor's office and tries to explain what she's going through. She talks about the mood swings, the suicidal thoughts, the panic, the despair. The doctor nods and writes PMS in the notes. She leaves the office feeling smaller than when she walked in. Because once again, no one heard her. Once again, no one believed her. This is what PMDD does. It doesn't just make you suffer, it makes you feel crazy for suffering. It gaslights you. And when the professionals don't listen, when even your own family doesn't understand, you start to gaslight yourself. You start to think maybe it's your fault. Maybe you're just weak. Maybe this is who you are. But it's not. This is a condition with real, measurable, devastating impact. And yet, most people have never heard of it. Or worse, don't believe it exists. It's a monthly neurological hijacking, a hormonal earthquake that rips through the emotional brain, a dysregulation of serotonin, an assault on identity. But because it's cyclical, because she returns to normal a few days later, everyone forgets. Even she forgets. Until it happens again. That forgetting is dangerous. It leads to a life lived in cycles of destruction and regret, of apology and shame, of coping mechanisms that turn into self-sabotage, of relationships lost and dreams delayed. She begins to dread ovulation because it means the descent is near. She loses 2 weeks every month, half her life, navigating survival. And all the while, she's expected to keep functioning, to show up, to smile, to pretend. But inside, she's breaking. That's why naming it matters. That's why telling the truth, even in whispers, becomes a lifeline. She starts looking for others. She finds online communities, hashtags, articles. She watches videos. She cries. Because finally, someone is saying what she never could. Finally, someone has lived what she thought no one else could possibly understand. And for the first time, the fog starts to lift. Not completely. Not forever. But just enough to breathe again. Once she knows it has a name, PMD, the narrative begins to shift. Because naming is power. It transforms chaos into clarity. It separates her from the disorder. She is not the mood swings. She is not the breakdowns. She is a person experiencing a real, physiological disruption, and that matters. She dives into the research. She learns that PMDD is not rare. It affects nearly 1 in 20 women of reproductive age. It's in the DSM-5. It has diagnostic criteria. It's not in her head, it's in her brain chemistry, her hormonal sensitivity, her nervous system. She begins to understand the science. Estrogen and progesterone don't just affect reproduction. They affect serotonin. They affect GABA receptors. They modulate the brain's stress response. And for women with PMD, even minor hormonal fluctuations can feel like full-blown psychological earthquakes. This isn't overreaction. It's hypersensitivity hardwired into the body. It's inflammation. It's cortisol dysregulation. It's trauma intersecting with biology. She starts to recognize the pattern. The week after ovulation, when progesterone rises, is when things fall apart. She doesn't just get moody. She feels rage she can't control. She cries over nothing and everything. She spirals into dark thoughts that feel like they come from nowhere. She forgets who she is. She wants to disappear. And then, her period comes. The hormone levels drop. And like magic, she feels normal again. That contrast is cruel. Because it makes her doubt everything that came before. How can one woman exist in two opposite states? How can she be high-functioning one week and unable to get out of bed the next? She begins to realize. She has two lives. Two selves. Two realities, split by a chemical tide that keeps crashing. And no one sees it but her. She thinks about all the things PMD has cost her. The jobs she couldn't hold. The friendships she distanced from. The plans she canceled last minute. The projects she abandoned. The apologies she made, not even remembering what she did wrong, only that she hurt someone. She starts grieving. Not just for the things she lost, but for the version of herself she might have been, had she known sooner. But that grief gives way to something else. Permission. Permission to stop blaming herself. Permission to take her own experience seriously. Permission to stop trying to be normal and start trying to be well. She stops Googling how to be more disciplined and starts Googling PMD treatment. She deletes the toxic productivity apps. She starts cycle tracking. She writes in a journal not to shame herself, but to observe patterns. She prints out the symptoms and highlights the ones that scream me. She brings it to a new doctor. And she speaks, not with doubt, but with conviction. Because now she has language. Now she has evidence. Now she knows her truth. And even if the doctor dismisses her, this time, she won't dismiss herself. That shift changes everything. She no longer accepts just PMS as an answer. She no longer swallows shame every 28 days. She no longer lets people minimize what she lives through. She starts fighting back. Not with aggression, but with knowledge, with boundaries, with community, with care. And slowly, she starts building a new identity. Not as a broken woman, not as a hormonal mess, but as someone who knows her body intimately, who respects her cycle, who advocates for herself, who survives something invisible and rises anyway. This isn't the end of the story, but it's the beginning of something far more powerful than silence. There's a version of her life that nobody sees. Not her friends, not her coworkers, not even the people who love her most. It's the version that exists in the quiet moments before a breakdown. In the bathroom where she locks herself to cry silently. In the mirror she avoids because her reflection feels foreign. In the bed where she lies awake, wondering how she'll survive another day of this. PMDD doesn't just affect her moods, it reshapes her entire world. She starts walking on eggshells inside her own mind. She second-guesses every word she says. She replays conversations from hours ago, convinced she sounded crazy. She isolates herself not because she wants to, but because she's scared of being too much again. And when the rage comes, it comes like lightning. She shouts. She slams doors. She says things she doesn't mean. And when it passes, shame floods in. She becomes her own judge, jury, and executioner. She writes long apologies. She overcompensates. She punishes herself with silence, believing she doesn't deserve connection. This emotional whiplash becomes her norm. People start calling her moody, unstable. She's great, until she's not. These labels cut deeper than they realize. Because she's trying. She's trying harder than anyone knows. She's reading books. She's taking supplements. She's meditating. She's tracking her cycle. She's hiding the worst of it from everyone. But hiding comes with a cost. It creates a dual identity. The woman she pretends to be, and the woman she's terrified others will see. And the more she hides, the lonelier it gets. She stops accepting invites. She cancels last minute. She avoids intimacy because how can she let someone close if she can't predict who she'll be next week? She starts to shrink. Not physically, but emotionally. Her dreams get smaller. Her voice gets quieter. Her sparkle dims. She tells herself she's low maintenance now. But really, she's just tired of disappointing people. Her relationships begin to suffer. Partners don't understand why she pulls away. Friends think she's flaky. Family assumes she's being dramatic. And she doesn't always have the words to explain. How do you describe a darkness that only visits once a month, but feels like it consumes your whole being? How do you explain that your brain tells you to give up, and then 2 days later acts like everything's fine? It's exhausting. It's confusing. It's terrifying. And it makes her question if she's worthy of love at all. She starts believing the lie that PMDD whispers. You are too much. You are unpredictable. You are unsafe to be close to. This belief seeps into everything. She stops speaking up at work. She avoids leadership roles. She turns down opportunities. Because what if she crashes again? What if she ruins everything again? And so she stays small, safe, invisible. But that invisibility doesn't protect her. It just isolates her further. Until one day, she sees another woman online, speaking the words she never dared to say out loud. I lose myself before my period. I feel suicidal and then I'm fine. I thought I was broken, but it's PMDD. And something inside her cracks open. Because maybe she's not crazy. Maybe she's not alone. Maybe she's not the only one living this double life. This realization is subtle, but seismic. Because now there's a thread of connection. A hand reaching through the fog. And that thread might be the thing that keeps her going. This shift doesn't happen all at once. It begins with a whisper. A thought that maybe she's not the problem. That maybe her pain has context. That maybe her brain is not broken. But responding exactly as expected to a biological chaos no one warned her about. This thought becomes a spark. She begins to track her symptoms with intention. Not just moods but energy, sleep, thoughts, desires, sensitivities. She overlays them on her cycle calendar and begins to see the pattern. Week 1, stable. Week 2, social. Week 3, unraveling. Week 4, drowning. This map gives her clarity. She no longer wakes up wondering why she feels so far from herself. She knows. And knowing changes everything. Now, when the fog starts creeping in, she doesn't panic, she prepares. She moves important meetings earlier in the month. She builds buffer days into her calendar. She gives herself permission to rest during the luteal phase. She stops overbooking. She cancels without guilt. She replaces the word lazy with cyclical. She also starts saying things she never said before. I'm entering my PMDD week. I need quiet today. I'm feeling a wave of disconnection, it'll pass. This isn't me, it's my chemistry. And slowly, the people in her life begin to adjust. Not everyone gets it. Some still roll their eyes. But the ones who matter, they listen. They ask questions. They learn her rhythms. They become allies. Her therapist becomes a mirror. Together, they unravel the shame. They separate her identity from her symptoms. They make space for rage without judgment. They make room for grief. She begins experimenting with tools, not to fix herself, but to support herself. She tries magnesium. She cuts caffeine. She adds protein. She reduces alcohol. She starts gentle exercise, not punishment, but nourishment. She plays with light therapy. She learns about adaptogens, sleep hygiene, trauma loops. Each small choice becomes an act of rebellion against the narrative that says she has to suffer silently. And the rebellion spreads. She starts writing again, painting, dancing in her room. She starts doing things just for herself, not for approval, not for productivity, not to be better, but to be real. And in those moments, she feels a flicker of self again. Not the version trying to hold it together. Not the version performing stability. But the true self, messy, sensitive, cyclical, powerful. This self is not a liability. She is a force. Because she's learned to feel deeply. To survive storms others don't even see. To rebuild herself every 30 days with grace. And this resilience? It's not weakness. It's wisdom. She begins to wonder how many women live like this, thinking they're alone. How many are medicated for something no one ever explained? How many ended relationships thinking they were too unstable to be loved? The answer breaks her heart, but it also fuels her purpose. Because if her story can make even one woman feel seen, it was worth every collapse, every shame spiral, every lonely night. This is no longer just about survival. It's about transformation. PMDD may not vanish. The luteal weeks may still be hard. But now she meets them prepared. With compassion. With tools. With community. With herself. And in that shift, she reclaims her life, cycle by cycle, day by day. She no longer sees herself as a victim of her cycle. She sees herself as a translator of it, a witness, an interpreter of the waves that rise and fall each month. Not to be feared, but understood. This shift doesn't come from pretending things are fine. It comes from facing the truth. That living in a female body is complex. That hormones are not just women's issues. They are whole body, whole brain experiences. And for women like her, with heightened sensitivity, with trauma history, with deep emotional wiring, those shifts hit like earthquakes. But now, when the ground shakes, she knows how to steady herself. Not perfectly, not always, but with the kind of grace she never knew she had. She no longer needs to explain her worth. She no longer needs to apologize for her rhythm. She doesn't chase the idea of being low maintenance. She embraces the sacred maintenance required to live in alignment with her nature. That's power. That's not weakness, it's intelligence. It's emotional literacy. It's nervous system fluency. It's womanhood, rewritten. And this woman who once hated her cycle, who once wished for a flat line instead of a wave, who once felt punished by her own biology, now walks in sync with it. She knows when to build. She knows when to rest. She knows when to speak, when to pause, when to reflect. She lives like a season, not a straight line, not a performance, a rhythm. She honors her luteal phase not as a curse, but as a mirror, a time when everything she's been ignoring comes to the surface. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's also wise. It shows her what's out of alignment, what's unresolved, what still needs her attention. In that way, PMDD becomes a teacher, a brutal one at times, but a truth teller, a revealer. And in this revelation, she finds something she never expected. Other women, dozens, hundreds, thousands, women who whisper the same stories in comment sections, in forums, in circles, in journals. Women who also thought they were alone. Women who also survived the second half of their cycle in silence. Women who now speak. And in that chorus of voices, she finds home. She no longer needs to pretend. She no longer needs to disappear. She no longer has to wait for validation. She is her own proof. Her story is evidence. Her survival is enough. And if you're listening to this now, if you feel like this is describing the life you've never dared to say out loud, know this: you are not crazy. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are cycling. You are complex. You are sacred. And your body is not your enemy. It's your oldest ally, asking to be heard. So write it down. Track your waves. Tell your story. Find your rhythm. Because the world doesn't need another woman pretending to be fine. It needs women who know themselves deeply, cyclically, truthfully. And maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of your return to yourself. Welcome back. You've always been here. Even in the fog, even in the fire, even when you forgot. You were never gone. You were just becoming. It's not your fault. It never was. And now that you know, you don't have to suffer in silence again. Not this time. Not ever again.